The Pacers aren't taking a gap year. Maybe. So neither are we. We may not be the front-running podcast anymore, but the Caitlin Samson or Samson Caitlin podcast, whichever order you prefer, is back. At least for today, because we're here to recap preseason, look ahead to the regular season, and we're going to do so via the medium of mailbag questions that were sent in. So if you don't like what we talk about, that's not completely our fault. It has to do with what questions we were asked to answer. Without further ado, welcome back to Samson and Pacers coverage. He's fully decked out in Pacers gear in order to do his job today. How are you doing, and are you ready to mailbag?
I love mailbagging. Very ready to mailbag. I'm doing great. I'm in my finest yellows and navy blues. And while this doesn't serve as well as maybe a popsicle shirt, it's pretty good. How about you? How do you feel? You're dressed in dulcet tones. I know that's an audio thing,
I'm
but
kind of blending in with my curtain a little bit. Yeah. It's actually pretty rainy in Indiana, so I figured I might as well just be the dark cloud here. Hopefully it's not completely dark clouds as we talk about these various questions, although many of them were coming from a problem-solving bent, which in the past is what the Pacers have been very good at. They are good at problem solving. Just going to dive right in because that's the types of questions that were asked. Michelle Wolfzog started out saying, in all caps, "We love you, Samson." My interest is more about style choices and what we see coming out of preseason. Am I too attached to older project players like Isaiah Jackson?
so when I first got this, when you sent this over, I thought this was going to be about how I dress initially, and I was like, okay, let's get into it. I don't think you're too. I don't know how attached you are to Ijax, but I wouldn't give up on him just yet. There's a lot of stuff there. He was the player who I decided to do the audio version of a Caitlin article. He was incorporated there, and because he's very fun, and I don't think he's quite back to the level of fun that he was at his peak. The getting back, the rehabilitation process can be quite lengthy for guys. You can be on the floor and still not all the way there. There's a lot of stuff to like about Isaiah Jackson, although I didn't think he was good in preseason. However, I think as a through line, we're going to be talking about how the Pacers had trouble finding anyone to be good. The five.
Okay, so on the Isaiah front, I tend to agree with Samson, and I also want to give him time because obviously he's not even 12 months removed from having Achilles surgery. That's going to be a common theme for people that we're talking about with the Pacers over the next year and a half. And so two things kind of stood out for me with him is that he's going to have to build chemistry at both ends of the floor because it's also important to remember that he's barely played with Pascal Siakam at all. So that's part of it. And then also I think that they're probably going to have to rethink some of his positioning and role within the offense, whether he continues to play with the starters or not. So these are some clips that I pulled to provide a visual of what I'm talking about. So this play is actually supposed to be like a sideline interaction where what we missed here is that Talon Peter set a ball screen for Aaron Nesmith as the bring up ball handler. And please remember that Aaron Nesmith here was the bring up ball handler because that's kind of an important tidbit. But Isaiah basically on top of Andrew Nembhard there. That's not the spacing that you want. Like in this action, Isaiah should be setting a flare screen for Talon Peter, and then Andrew would shift down to the lower wing area. Isaiah's just kind of floating on the perimeter, and in Andrew's defense, I think he stayed higher, realizing I'm the only ball handler on the floor. So they try to go into an empty ball screen with Siakam, and then again, Isaiah's just like with Wemby effectively tracking the ball that entire possession and not really guarding Isaiah. He's just playing a one-man zone. He kind of struggles to create passing angles. That ends up being a turnover. The Pacers were very high in turnovers during preseason without Tyrese. And so just to give people a look, this is what play they were trying to run. Typically, they do this a lot when TJ is on the floor. So Ben Sheppard's screen for TJ comes off that flare for Thomas Bryant. And then typically TJ would attack baseline. If he can't get baseline, Thomas Bryant drops down into a snug pick and roll, like down there along the baseline for TJ. TJ doesn't need that because TJ is like the master of making spacing that doesn't make sense. And, dizzying driving angles. He's going to get into the paint. You're going to have a high rate of touches in the paint when he's out there. Some of this continues to carry over a little bit with Isaiah, where in the second game, they made adjustments so that he wasn't just parked in the dunker spot quite as much. So like on drive penetration, you're going to see him in this game backpedal out to the corners a lot more, try to get into uphill handoffs, which is what a lot of teams will do to space with non-spacing bigs. He keeps moving much better in terms of his flow game than what you saw in the first game. And then see it again here where they're deliberately spacing him in the corner. Aaron's kind of telling him, like, go screen the secondary help, and then he does go set that flare. So in the second game, a lot more activity spacing him to the corner, even though he is a non-spacing big, getting him to screen the secondary help. Did you have any thoughts just offensively before I show this defensive clip on any of that? Or like, I think that not all, but some of this is twofold. I think some of it's chemistry with new teammates. We have to remember this isn't a lineup that's played together. And two, that the Pacers are having to do a lot of experimentation in real time because they are having to adapt to having multiple non-shooting bigs coming in and out of the lineup.
I thought that he took to it probably like his intention in working through that was the best of the group of centers. He tried a lot of stuff. He did move a lot. You and I always talk about, depending on the coverage of the screen, if the big isn't going to be at the level, as a screener, you now have a huge opportunity to 1v1 the guy playing defense and to create space and to create these different responses. And while probably Jay Huff, who we'll talk about, I think is probably the most naturally talented at it, I thought Isaiah was probably the best at doing it in preseason. And, that willingness probably goes a long way with the Pacers, if I had to guess.
And I think with Isaiah, he probably of the bigs, and this is something that's shown since he was a rookie, he very quietly does have decent passing chops. And we've seen that in some of these games with his chemistry with Mathurin, just like cutting back door as a pin down screener out of Chicago actions. They run some splits with Isaiah. I think when the regular season starts, you're going to see even more potentially split actions, potentially handoffs with what you just talked about. Like if the big is playing off of Isaiah, you almost have an advantage then if he's wheeling at the top of the key and running handoffs, or maybe more uphill handoffs to get, as you said, the 2-on-1 on the empty side there as well. And I do think that they'll space him out despite the fact that he's a non-shooting big. I just think that they didn't have a lot of time to implement some of that so far, and it's more just getting a sense of what they have. Defensively, I'm going to run this clip without commentary, and I'm going to let you say what you think went on here. So let me back up just a little.
Are you going to be upset if I just say, like, Dylan Harper rocks? I really like it's a really nice drive.
From the Pacers' perspective, say what you wish.
Okay, so it's Ajax is in a tough position, right? Because you don't want to let a guy turn the corner. In some sense, like you want to wall that off, but also you don't want to allow the split. And this is the question a lot of bigs have to deal with. But I'm not exactly. I don't know. Mathurin is kind of. This is Mathurin, yes. Mathurin is kind of. I maybe would have liked a little bit more work from him to guide or send or anything like that. But Ajax, I don't know. I think when I look at how smooth Dylan Harper is moving through that, I don't know how Ajax is supposed to contain. Maybe I'm not privy to. Maybe he's playing the coverage wrong, and you can enlighten me. But at this point in this possession, unless he just goes and meets the ball much higher and blitzes, he's in a lose-lose situation no matter what. Like, you can't contain Dylan Harper here, I feel.
I think that they were running incongruent coverages. So This is why I'm talking about chemistry, because on the approach, you can see Isaiah yelling out pretty demonstratively what coverage they want to run. He looks to me like he's expecting Dylan Harper to dribble over the screen to the left. Remember, Dylan Harper is left-handed. He's very left-hand dominant. Ben, meanwhile, looks like he's weakening him. He looks like he's trying to put his back to Luke Cornett there and directly weak, in this case, strong Dylan Harper to his right. That means that Isaiah has to move laterally away from the direction that he was expecting the coverage to be in order to meet Dylan Harper. That's why they get split. Pascal's not going to step up and expose the dunker from Wemby. He tries to slide laterally, not quick enough. So that was controversial for some reason on the internet. I tend to think that the coverage Isaiah called out isn't the coverage at the point of attack that got executed. That flows into the next question, which again, I just want to repeat, these were questions that were sent to me. I didn't write these questions. So Grant Burnett, with all the talk about unsustainable workload that would be given to Nembhard, should he continue guarding the opposing team's number one option while moving into the primary handler creator role? It makes sense that to lessen his burden by giving the defensive assignments over to Ben. The results in preseason haven't been greatly promising, but I hold out hope due to his competitive nature. While watching the last Spurs game, and in this case he means the first Spurs game, I noticed him being easily screened off the primary ball handler several times. This isn't new for him, but obviously the best defenders are more adroit at navigating these screens, sticking with their guy, and not giving up the easy switch. What should Ben be doing a better job of while being screened? Are the Pacers communicating that these screens are happening fast enough at the point of attack? And what is it that makes Nembhard so special as a navigator of the defensive floor?
So adroit is like adept, but different. I'd literally never heard this word before, by the
You've
way.
never heard the word adroit?
I never heard adroit. I never heard it or read it. Or maybe I had read it and didn't clock it. That's okay. So I learned something. I'm glad. Ben, I think, is not great at navigating the in between of things. And there's always going to be like an interpretive nature to being the front man. And the benefit of being the front man, I think the Isaiah Jackson, if this was controversial, if you're the front man and you screw up the coverage, usually people think it's the big. Bigs kind of get shellacked in coverage all the time. But Ben, I think, has a tough time as like a consistent guy at the point of attack, kind of toggling between all these things. And that can lead to breakdowns. I think his pursuit is typically quite strong. I think that he cares. I think that he gives effort. But I think that there's just sometimes an inconsistency in performing scheme. And, that's on the coaching staff to try and simplify things when they have to be simplified and try and get him to, play two complexities when necessary. It's a tough balance to strike, I understand. But that's how I feel about Ben at the point of attack. There's things he does that I think are strong, and he has good pursuit, and he cares. But a lot of the best point of attack guys are really clever and help their bigs a lot usually.
Yeah, because in the starting lineup, I talked about it all summer. You and I talked about it. Like, who is the Andrew Nembhard for Andrew Nembhard? The Pacers are trying to attack that from both sides to an extent because they're using Pascal more as a secondary ball handler. They're using Ben more at the point of attack. Ben was getting the assignments in Minnesota. He was guarding Anthony Edwards. He's doing more on-ball pick-and-roll coverages than Andrew is to this point. It needs to continue to be Ben because Aaron has to take some of those assignments from Pascal because Pascal's being asked to do more too.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the benefit, I think, from having Ben do this, both for him and for the team, is that he's decent picking the ball up full court. And they're asking him to do that. He can turn the ball in the backcourt some. His hand activity's been better, I feel like, in preseason. And with how much they're crashing the offensive glass, and he's a good crasher, he's already putting himself in position to automatically be picking up the ball. That much is good. His actual screen navigation, which what's Grant's asking here, is two things kind of stand out for me that I'll just try to communicate here, is that when the screen is coming, he'll be in a stance. Once it's time for him to actually navigate the screen, sometimes he stands up out of that stance, and it makes him appear slower getting over it than what I think his athletic ability is actually capable of doing. And then the bigger thing, which I think is the most important, is, and that the Pacers need him to address, is he gives up too many screen rejections. So that stood out in some of these clips as well. So as an example from last year, let me roll that back, is if they're having him pick up full court rather than at half court, I think that should actually help him because sometimes he's just giving too much ground to the ball. He's gapping it too much. And if you're not up to direct and connect and semi-transition, it becomes very easy to give up a rejection. And then Pascal's having to make an emergency rotation. He's late there against Luka. And the half court, like something for Ben that I hope people will look out and watch for, is like it needs to be forearm to hip magnet and be on the other side of that screen against Dennis Schroeder. So he's not, easy rejection to the rim. Good play by Thomas Bryant there. This one is the one that we already looked at. I think it was confusion with whether they were weaking Dylan Harper or not. And then this was a few plays before that against the Spurs where he starts to go over the top of that screen against Luke Cornett. It's because there's not as much pressure on the ball, and then you're giving up a rejection that far from the basket. That's going to be really tough for Andrew or Aaron to do much about. And when you look back at a lot of the film, a lot of that's stemming from rejections. So Rejections are tough for any defense to handle. It's causing an emergency rotation. Defenses aren't built around normally, like, how many defenses are drilling at practice? Here's what we're going to do if we give up a screen rejection. Defenses are built around, here's what we do when we force people over the top of the screen. And Samson is correct. I think typically people want to know a lot of times, like, why didn't they send Ben under that screen at half court? I've brought up and asked those types of questions, but I think it really does stem from the simplicity of it. They want to keep it easier for Ben at the point of attack. Let him know, like, we just need you to be pushing over the top all the time. That's what we need the coverage to be. It can lead to really some long runways if you do give up the rejection, but I think that's the reason why. Next question. In addition to the center issues that the Pacers have, obviously they're trying to cycle through a lot of different options at third string and now backup point guard with TJ out for a month. Quentin Jackson also has a hamstring injury. They tried DeLon Wright. He looked a little bit arrhythmic before he got hit in the face, and then he got hit in the face, and they had to waive him. They tried Campaign. Campaign got waived yesterday. So now it's kind of a question of, is this going to be more wing initiation? Is it going to be more potential Talon Peter, Ben Sheppard initiation? So this question from Jeff Hasser. When Jarace is playing more of a point guard / forward role, do you think this is a coaching choice, Jarace's natural predilection, or just a need with limited ball handlers available? Or maybe all three. It feels like he is routinely overtaxed in this role, and I think that you had referenced, meaning me, that he could have more success in short role passing or secondary playmaking. And this season, where we may see Jarace playing the primary playmaker for whatever reason, where are you looking to see growth in these instances, or do you think the Pacers are better to go deeper in the point guard depth chart to keep Jarace in a similar playmaking role that he would have with a fully healthy team?
So Jarus, so the game that I wrote on was I loved what Jarus did for, like, he was taking a bunch of possessions. He had a couple bully drives that I really liked. There is that, Pascal, you wrote about it and we talked about it, this catch and go or go and catch aspect, like play with a little bit more force. Jarus, to me, is a tremendously talented player. The touch I like a lot. He scans and surveys and can make plays with advantage. We've done film on some of his best defensive games where his hands activity and like ability to, kind of be quick in space really can elevate some of the defensive playmaking the Pacers might be looking for. I I don't know about like I don't know what his usage is going to be exactly, but I do love him in the short roll situations. I love him when he's decisive. And short roll is not the most decisive situation because, it's kind of like grab dribbling down the lane, maybe making plays there. But his skill set says he should be elite at this. His the way he sees the floor should make him elite. But I also do like him popping out, catching, having opportunities to step down. And not just because it might not be the best thing for him right now, but he still is a prospect. And there's real meat on the bone here for him to be a guy who drives bigs and a guy who bullies smalls. This is part of the appeal of Jarus, and it will require work and developing his own counters. But especially, this isn't a gap year, but especially in a year where they're not, mounting a title defense or something like that, or even mounting a finals defense, probably, I think it would make sense to allow him to play in space as a driver a lot. And that means working off of guys. I don't know if that answers it perfectly, but I trust his playmaking when he's in motion, maybe most importantly.
To answer the first part of the question, I think that he does play with a little bit more pep in his step when he gets to bring the ball up the floor. He has past history going back to high school of getting to play point guard. I think he enjoys that role. Right now, for both him and the Pacers, I don't think they've had much choice, to be honest with you. And I don't think that in the early portion of the season, they're probably going to have much choice. He's going to have to do some of that unless they surprise me and in the next 2 days find a different veteran point guard or make some minor trade of some sort. Like, they're going to have him being the bring up ball handler. Just by the numbers, Jarace is averaging 7.6 possessions as the bring up ball handler in preseason. That was only 2.45 last season. So I think some of this is a little bit of both. I think that he does like doing it, but I think that it's just out of necessity mainly. To answer his point about what I've said in the past about the short roll playmaking, this goes back to his time at Houston, where there's like I didn't get to include those clips because I was honestly afraid. I didn't know if it would get copyright claimed if I showed his college
The
film.
college stuff is so bad, man.
Yeah, I
They're
was like, I cut it off. I had it at the beginning of this clip package, and I was like, I don't want us to get copyright claimed, so I
mhm.
better just take those out. But please know that he did do this at Houston, and there was times where he made reads where it wasn't just like most bigs nowadays can catch the ball in the middle of the floor and automatically throw it to the opposite corner. Like that's what area Miles grew in. Jarus can actually manipulate it a little bit and make different reads based on where teams help. So it was beneficial to him in the game that Samson covered while I was at a wedding that the Thunder played a ton of zone in this game, particularly in the second half. And I made a joke on Twitter and was like, I wish more teams would play zone when Jarus is on the floor just so we could watch him make really cool passes a bunch of times. So like he made high-low pass where he actually led Jay Huff a little bit on the right side of the rim, which I thought was good. Ran the flare slip play that the Pacers run a lot for Pascal in the playoffs. They did with Jarus to make high-low pass, which that's just not great hands by Jay Huff, but it is a good pass from Jarus. Throwing a lob to James Wiseman, and then even getting this little touch pass out of the middle of the zone to the opposite corner. I wish we could get to see him do that more, but I don't think that the roster is super conducive this season to him being able to do it. Not only because they need more ball handlers, but because as much as I love my beloved short roll, in order to access the short roll, you oftentimes need your guards to either get blitzed or have some screen craft where you can stay below, screen below, stay below, and then slip into that space. They potentially are going to have multiple guards at point who might be seeing unders, might be seeing hedge to unders. That makes it more difficult to access the short roll, despite the fact that I generally like, and it's not fair to make this comparison, but it's kind of true. Like Jarus does have some Draymond Green in him as far as his ability to, with his floater package and making those soft touch passes under the rim, do some of those. He can also do fake handoff stuff that Draymond really likes within Golden State's offense. There just hasn't been much opportunity for him to get to do that. As far as the point guarding and what I would want to see as changes is part of the issue is, and Samson knows this from covering the Raptors a few years ago, and why I think Darko probably didn't do it as much, is that when you run a wing-led offense, it usually takes a little bit longer to get into action. And you could see Rick a few times from the sidelines being like, we need to get into stuff quicker. So like when Jarus was the bring up ball handler, the average time to first action was 6.583 seconds. The Clippers ranked last in the NBA in this category last year at 6.547 seconds. And as you'll notice, the Clippers run a lot of wing-led offense. So for
Yep.
the Pacers' sake, and a team that, like, especially without having Tyrese, is going to want to continue to play fast, get into stuff as much as they can, it doesn't get there quite as quick when Jarus is having to be the ball handler all the time is what you would want. And then also, like, there were a lot of times in this game where, Tony Bradley's not a trailing five in the same way that Miles Turner was. So, in places where they would have just pitched that back, now they're a little hesitant to do it. And now there's a little bit more defenders in the gaps a lot of the time. And there was times where I really wanted, like, hey, Tony Bradley, stop and set that flare screen so that Talon Peter can get a shot. And I just think they need to be more active screening the help in instances. This was the play that I think that you wrote about in your recap that both of us liked, where they thought that was zone and then it ended up being man. So Jarus kind of had to create from a one-on-one situation, like taking that advice from Pascal. That's really good on a one-on-one, but that's not with him as a primary initiator. Here you can kind of see that gap help again. Like I just want to see Tony Bradley go to the opposite block, and when he gets there, walk up and set that flare so the pass becomes easier for Jarus, because he's not a guy with his handle where his handle's going to take him very far without you doing something to loosen up that help, which, just to point out, like, this is even something that the Pacers have done for Tyrese. Like, watch Miles when Tobias Harris is inching over. Like, he goes and sets that screen on the gap help to flare, but he healed. So it's not just unique to Jarus, it's with everybody. So that's kind of something that I'd like to see, that if they are going to need him more at point and it is going to take them a little bit longer to get into actions, that gives help defenses longer to load up. If they are loading up, then maybe set some off-ball screens to try to loosen it and make those passing angles a little bit more readily accessible, because Jarus is a very talented passer for his position. And I just want to close it and say, and I'll let you say more if you want to, I thought that Jarus did a lot of pretty decent things on both ends of the floor for the Pacers during preseason. Like, I wouldn't say that, like, I'm suddenly going to start him over Aaron Nesmith or something, but as far as being a rotation player, I think that we're going to see some better flashes more consistently from him this year.
Yeah, he's probably the player we're very well aware of Andrew Nembhard. We're very well aware of Pascal Siakam. These guys obviously will drive the Pacers more than anyone else. I'm probably most excited for Jarace. I really liked what I saw in preseason. I I've been There's been a really tough job of him trying to implement his skills on
Yep.
this roster and fit, but that doesn't mean they're not there. Like there's a real player
Mhm.
there. There's a lot of burgeoning skills, and especially because of his, the term predilection was used. Like most wing players are like fours or big forwards. When you drive and get cut off, you go to that back down. You're not going to have the defense moving, and guards typically get the defense moving. Wings don't as often. What's really important is active cutters to make use of a defense that will stand in a shell, and bigs who are going to interpretively screen. As you said, it wasn't Tyrese kind of operates as a wing creator sometimes just because he's a little bit different. But he's obviously very fast, but in how he plays. And also, since you brought it up, you'll find not like fans enjoy the game, of course, and you don't have to talk about it in the way that Caitlin does. But what Caitlin said about bringing the ball up, pacing matters so much in plays, and a lot of guards that fans like versus don't like, you can actually just basically it comes down to like, do they play with good pacing or not? And good pacing is everything. And Jarace this year, I hope he learns a little bit better pacing. And the Pacers are a great team, obviously, to inform that.
Keeping with the trend of the bench, this is, I feel, a very valid question and one the Pacers are going to have to give serious consideration to, with maybe finding not a perfect solution, but hopefully some good solutions among the ones that they get to choose from. Pacers fans since 1969 asks, with TJ out, how can the team, particularly the second unit, generate the paint touches that seem so critical to igniting the offense? So before I let you answer it, the paint touches with Nembhard off the court, the percentage of how often their touches are reaching the paint is 16.55% in preseason. The team that ranked last season was at 18.09%. So the Pacers are ranking worse than the worst team in paint touch frequency when Nembhard isn't on the floor. So that speaks a lot to TJ racks up paint touches with a plum. He racks up drives per 100 quite frequently. So what are they going to do without TJ there to swirl the drink, as it were?
I think probably it is kind of what you talked about is like an interpretive flare where you pass over the top with one of Jarus or Pascal and you put down the ball immediately. You have the 45 driving angle. You try and get that there, depending on where the help comes from, spray the pass. They have to, if like TJ at some point arrives back, but as far as we're looking at this team, they have to be a team without these big major creators. They have to build advantages. And where the Pacers, the advantage used to be very inherent because it was like, oh, they're blitzing Tyrese, and now boom, it's right there. It might not be the first action down, it might be the second or third, and that requires a due diligence from everybody on the roster on being like, I'm gonna make a quick decision, I'm gonna take a step in. A lot of times there was just enough room. They were a team that's like catch and shoot. They might have to work a little bit harder, and they're gonna see guys like Ben Sheppard. They're gonna see guys like Talon Peter. They're gonna see Neesmith, a bunch of guys up and down the roster who this will be a year and an opportunity for them to not just be a guy who's like catch and shoot, but it's like, okay, progressive read. And they're going to get some info back there, but they're going to be asked to do it, I presume. When you don't have a guy creating these big opportunities for you, then you gotta build little by little. That would be my expectation. I don't have a specific play or anything in mind, but you gotta play this style.
This is separate from this question, just as a follow up. Like, who off the bench do you think could develop those types of skills, or are you expecting to maybe see more of from?
I like Talon a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now I watched the big Talon game. I wrote about that game. It just happened
Every
to be,
game is a big Talon game, Samson.
yeah, true. And the stats at Summer League weren't like incredible or anything, but when I watched him, I was like, "Ooh, I love the way this guy plays." And then you made the boss call to Kevin to put him on the two way, And this is a joke, people, by the way. This is a joke. And then I thought he was awesome in preseason. And like, here's the thing: there are roles that everyone's supposed to play. There is like, you pay your dues, and oh, you're a two-way, you're undrafted or deep second round or something like that. But Rick is a coach who's gonna who does a lot of concocting, ooh, how are we going to fix this or address this? And he's a coach who's willing to try a lot of stuff. And guess what? If Taylor Peter can play, it doesn't matter where they picked him up from. It doesn't matter that he's a two-way. He'll play. And I think he can play, man. I'm jealous he's not on the Raptors. Although I cover this team full time, so I'm very happy too.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah, I mean, Rick's been playing Ben Sheppard, and I mean, Ben Sheppard was a late first-round pick. Andrew was an early second-round pick, and Andrew was a starter in his rookie season. So I don't think Rick has a ton of concern about where people get drafted in terms of who he plays and when not.
There's a Mathurin and a Jarace thing sitting right in front of us. Yeah.
Which we will just sidestep and move on to the clips that I have. So I agree with Samson. I think it's going to have to be, I really liked what he said on the prior answer too, as far as like the pacing of all of this is going to be very important. The pacing between actions in the half court is going to be very important because you're going to have advantages multiply on top of each other. It's not just going to be one guy creating a big advantage at the beginning. So a side-by-side comparison, and I do not do this to pile dirt on Campaign, who's no longer on the team. It's just as an example. So with him as the backup point guard here and the initiator, I don't know what the Pacers are calling this play yet. It is new to preseason. I didn't see them run it last year, but basically it's a dribble at. The guy at the corner will leave. And then part of the issue here and in defense of Cameron Payne is you can see him being like, he really, like, James Wiseman was supposed to be at the top of the key here. And this is kind of like a recurrent thing where he doesn't always know where he's supposed to be within plays. But when he gets to the top of the key, then they go into a dribble handoff where the guard gets it back. And then Taylor Peter comes back around an off-ball screen. So this is the way that you're creating. It's not with dribble creation. It's on one side, we have a guy coming off an off-ball screen. On the other side, we have a guy sealing in the paint. And that's where you're hoping that you're either going to get an open three or you're going to get a paint touch. It doesn't get reversed quick enough. Campaign ends up kind of missing both of those potential options until eventually they have to like go and catch screen thing there with Obi Toppin when the ball comes to a rest. And now they have two people in the paint. So Obi's not going to touch it. And it ends up being a Campaign runner at the end of the clock. Like, I don't think that's anything that the Pacers really want. They run this same play, though, against the San Antonio Spurs. Taylor Peter at the point. You'll notice the difference when Obi Toppin is already at the top of the key, ready to catch the ball, and how much more pacing they're going to get between these actions. You're going to get two options, Pascal sealing or Ben Sheppard coming off the screen. They get Pascal, and now it is a paint touch, one pass, extra pass, Ben Sheppard, open three. So I think that's how they're going to hope to get more of the paint touches. And like it's helpful when Obi's out at the five in those types of situations, or if you're able to play J Huff as a stretch five more, because a common theme is the guards are oftentimes having their drives cut off because somebody's standing in the dunker spot. Credit Tony Bradley there because he sets an exit screen, or I should say a corner pin and screen rather, for Obi Toppin to make the three. But the bigs need to be more active in the dunker. Like right here, if Obi's going to get trapped at the end of the clock, like James has to absolutely flash to the middle of the paint. Otherwise, it's incredibly easy for two people to defend three at once. And then Cam's just not making those crackback reads. Like most of the guards are not making the crackback reads at all. They're not really getting any of those standstill lobs like they want to. So this is a play from last year that if you're going to need more wing and initiation between Pascal and Jarace, that I really like. When Pascal brings the ball up, Andrew would come off of, stagger away, get it, and then it's a ram screen for Tyrese to go set, a ghost screen, 5 out, and Andrew can get a paint touch. Even if it's not Miles Turner, I kind of just want them to put the bigs in the strong side corner and see what happens. Because even if they plug that gap, then maybe you can get them catching the ball at the rim with momentum on a crash. A lot of times bigs, opposing fives, still their tendency isn't to help off the strong side corner, even if it is a non-shooting big. Space out the floor, like what we were talking about with Isaiah, where they started, having him backpedal to the corners anyways, just so you can open up the paint. Because the numbers when the dunker spot is filled for the Pacers in preseason on pick and rolls has been really woeful by comparison to last year. So 0.711 points per chance on dunker spot actions compared to over a point per chance last year because they can't space guards in the dunker as much as what they did a year ago. So they're running more dunker spot pick and rolls, and yet they've been like pretty poor at those plays. So to answer in long short, like again, I think you kind of have to toy around with the ways that you're using the bigs, maybe more splits, maybe more handoffs, maybe more just seeing what they can do in the strong side corner, and then also more pacing between the actions, like what we saw with Talon there, is what my answer would be for the time being.
I have a curiosity question. This is my entry to the mailbag. So obviously Wiseman should have flashed middle with Toppin up there, but in opposing the two plays between Talon as the lead ball handler and Cam, there's a huge difference in where Toppin is placed and where Wiseman is placed. And that's largely because Wiseman every single time is like, I'm going to run to the basket and beat guys down the floor and see what offense I can create. How do you bridge that gap? Like, let's say you're a coaching staff or player, represent whichever POV you want. Are you like you're running to go beat everybody up the floor before the play is called, probably, and then, or maybe you're not.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about that dynamic?
The Pacers prefer that. I mean, they preferred that last year more so with Pascal and Obi as four rim runners, where a lot of times like they don't use the four to inbound the ball. They would use Miles to inbound the ball so that those two could get a running start. I referred to this and I talked to Rick about it a little bit on the podcast that they like to play inside, outside, inside. So inside in the first 7 seconds, if they can get that high seal with a, really open passing window, they want that. But then they need to morph to 5 out at the middle portion of the clock. Then they go back inside and they're either looking for a Gortat screen, a seal screen in the dunker to open those driving lanes late in the clock. So that's kind of the balance. And with James, part of the issue was, which he was better in the fourth quarter against OKC, especially because OKC was playing small and they were playing some zone, is that he was running down the floor and catching some of those passes. Some of it for him is in the prior games, he was running and beating everybody down the floor, and then he was just like standing behind Alize Johnson. Like if you're going to run and beat everybody down the floor and then you're just going to stand there, that's not really, like, it's not really doing anything. In that case, like, yes, he had already beat everybody down the floor, and that's why Cam's motioning like, this is what we're running, come back out of the paint. But that's also another thing that I talked to Rick about, is that you'll notice a lot of times that when they do that, they wouldn't have Miles come back out of the paint because it takes more time. And also it gives the big more time to communicate the coverage on the path up to the ball. Right. Like a lot of times if they need to reignite, they're going to be like, hey, Ben Sheppard, you go set that screen. Aaron Nesmith, you go set that screen, because it's quicker. The go screen's harder to communicate. They don't want to bring the bigs back out normally, which is why I said they're just having to do a lot of experimentation in defense of both the bigs and the Pacers. This isn't the way that they were playing necessarily a year ago. But as far as like, do we want to get rim run points from James Wiseman? I think that they absolutely do. And I think that they'll continue to look for that, but it's inside, outside, inside again, generally. Okay. Next one, Chris, besides the workload of carrying the offense and then picking up best players, what's your biggest concern of Nembhard running the offense this year? Limiting turnovers, or is there something else he'll need to work on to replicate Tyrese's game?
Listen, everyone's going to be making the hit ahead this year. I've seen the Raptors increase their hit ahead attempts by like 10. Everyone wants to advance the ball because they're like, holy smokes, we didn't think the Pacers were good. And then they were in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. He already is a guy who looks for it. But you do have to, you're not going to be Tyrese Halliburton, but you can use him and try and be a facsimile. And you can try and like really up the pace, and I'm sure they will. However, the immaculate what's the term you use?
Immaculate exception.
The immaculate exception. I don't know how that will look if Andrew is like, because a lot of this, how it manifests, Tyrese makes the game look easy. And then you ask somebody to like just process the same way he does, and then you're like, oh, something very hard is happening here. Yeah. So I won't know this until I'm looking at it square in the face with some numbers, probably, 30 games down the road. But I don't know. Like, yeah, you got to play faster, but not everyone can process everything quickly. I just got to see it with Andrew.
I think my thoughts on this are twofold. I wrote a piece before the start of preseason because somebody asked me a mailbag question about whether the Pacers would still be able to play this fast, hot ball basketball. And when I broke it all down, I came to the conclusion that like Nembhard's very good at throwing hit-ahead passes. He just didn't do it often last year because he was constantly on the floor with Tyrese and TJ, and he wasn't often the bring-up ball handler. Typically within the transition scheme, the Pacers preferred Nembhard as the punch and spray ball side hit-ahead guy because he makes such good decisions on creating, the two closeouts on the weak side. So he didn't have much to do there. And my bigger concern was like, well, if Nembhard's the primary and Pascal's the punch and spray guy, then Pascal's not going to be leaking out and catching as many of the passes for the high seals because he has to be a secondary ball handler. When I looked at the numbers, when Tyrese was off the floor, the Pacers still ranked third in hit-aheads per 100 last year, even without Tyrese. Like, this is very much part of their DNA. So in preseason, they were number one in hit-aheads again, and they were first in time of possession again, and they were third in passes per 100 again. So they're still finding a way to keeping the ball moving, keeping in mind that the starters, didn't play in an entire game as well. But the bigger issue is what Samson said. They had a very high turnover rate while they were attempting to do this. So it's more how do you mitigate that, which is what the questioner said. But also I think it's important that I don't think that Nembhard should try to replicate Tyrese's game. The two of them are special in their own respects. I don't think you are going to totally replicate what Tyrese does. And in some ways, Tyrese wouldn't replicate what Andrew necessarily does either. Like, except I will say in this one regard, that's why, I don't think he's going to fully replicate what Tyrese does. So if I were going to point to anything aside from the turnovers, this would be it. And these are the games that I always reference because they're the ones Andrew played without Tyrese last year. Aaron being guarded more often by the weakest assignment when Ben's out on the floor. So he's being guarded by Trae Young. Dyson Daniels guarding Andrew. Ducks under the first screen from Aaron. Aaron gets it. He has Tyrese alone on an island, Trae alone on an island, doesn't necessarily do anything there. Then it becomes hedge from Trae because they don't want to put Trae on Andrew. And look at Dyson. It's hedge and under. So that's taking away any potential for Aaron to slip toward the basket because he's going under the screen. And then the hedge is eliminating their ability to get the mismatch that they want. So then they're not really getting anything out of it. So in Andrew's case, it has not happened in preseason. None of the opponents that they played have gone under Andrew at all. But he takes a very low volume of pull-up threes. And I do really think it's going to happen because I watched Dyson do it for 2 straight games. You and I watched in the Knicks series when OG Anunoby started going under against Andrew. I think for Andrew's case, it's going to be more so not even necessarily hitting the pull-up threes, but how do I manipulate that under? Are there opportunities for me to reject screens when the guy starts to duck under? Can I use foot fakes to manipulate it? Can we get really good rescreen chemistry with somebody on the roster? And how does he work that to the team's advantage? Because TJ has been doing this for years because obviously everyone ducks under against TJ, but the Pacers had the highest under rate in the NBA when Tyrese didn't play last year. So I think that's part of it. And then also, again, just to copy off of Samson's homework, I think a lot of it's, again, pacing. It can't be that Isaiah has to circle back to go set the screen. That needs to be a transition drag screen so that Andrew can already be getting downhill. Otherwise, then it has to be, a pull-up three because the big's back. So that's kind of where I'm looking at is I do think eventually there's going to be a higher under rate because I don't think that Andrew's ever going to be a high volume pull-up 3-point shooting guy. And I think it's to your advantage because he is a really good playmaker.
If Huff, for all the unique feathery touch, unique passing stuff there is to his game, and everyone loves the reverse dunks.
Yeah,
I would love if he put on the hard hat for 22 minutes a game and was I'm gonna screen like crazy, I'm gonna flip, I'm gonna stick, I'm gonna just gum up as much stuff, and I'm gonna be hyper responsive to my ball handlers. I've watched limited Raptors offenses in terms of pull-up shooting. I've covered so many of them now. Screening makes everything different. And I sound like a guy who coaches 10-year-old kids. Stick to screen. But guys who have a knack for screening, who really hey, I'm going to make a difference on this play, and it might not show up in X or Y, but Huff, I think, probably has the best ability to skill tree this thing over the course of the year to be the guy who's doing the interpretive stuff, the guy who's Gortatting, the guy who's doing corner pin-ins, the guy who's getting funky in the dunker, and the guy who's flipping and switching stuff above the break. I would love to see him facilitate so much of what Andrew wants to do. And Andrew, he is a little bit of there's a lot of system in what he's been doing, but he's a hell of a playground player. Let him play around and work off his screens,
Because the fact of the matter is that league-wide rescreens are really high-efficiency plays. And
Yes.
some of that's because the league, especially in the playoffs, has taken to the Verajowing late pivot, especially against like guard-to-guard screens to make the screener have to recover with the ball moving away. But rescreens in general are a high-efficiency play. So I agree with you. Of the options on the roster, I kind of see Huff as the most likely person to be able to execute that. It was actually something that I answered in a mailbag a couple months ago because I didn't have anything to look off of, because this is why I'm going to give Jay Huff a little bit of leeway here, because he played for a Memphis Grizzlies team that played differently than the entire rest of the NBA at both ends of the floor. Like what they were doing defensively was very unique, and what they did offensively was very unique. The Grizzlies basically didn't run pick and roll. I looked, and it was very hard to find any examples of Jay Huff doing any rescreening because he wasn't doing a lot of screening, period. So I kind of wanted to know, what's his screen craft look like, and it was hard to find. So the Pacers have run less pick and roll over the last 4 years, but are still, in the upper third of the league, certainly. So I'm curious to see how that would look a little bit more often with Andrew at the point. I have the same curiosities as you do, but actually we can just flow right into the question about Jay Huff then. Leonard K. Bonarek. Huff's offensive abilities appear to be a perfect fit for the Pacers style. What is the path, if any, for them to be a competitive two-way team with him on the floor? He's referencing, I believe, what some of the defensive issues have been there.
Yeah. I mean, pacing. We're hitting on a lot of the same things because, for a team that doesn't have like super easy star answers, everything is in scheme and everything is in intention and everything is in pacing. Like that is how you gain advantages slowly and accumulate them over the course of a game. Huff being a guy who there is like this, he's fun when he's floating. He can make plays when he's floating and like popping in. But what would really, really help him on this Pacers team would be like a very strict adherence to the style and to meet it with like fantastic conditioning and verve, because he is a guy who you can see it when the play finds him. There's a lot of imagination there. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of talent. It's just like being in that position repeatedly and having the fitness to constantly put himself in the right position and the attention to detail to do so. And I think that could manifest on both sides of the floor. These are boring answers I'm giving, but like I actually think that's what it is for Jay.
A few quick talking points here with Jay. I totally agree with Samson. I mean, it's something that Rick kind of alluded to during here training camp and preseason, is that Jay Huff's very literally had to get himself up to speed with the speed that the Pacers play at. To make another pun on top of that, there's just a lot of times where you can see him literally huffing and puffing when they're trying to change into the floor. And so like this is a conditioning thing right there. I mean, pretty clearly. Then the other thing is, if they're going to continue defending screens this high, which is something I talked about, the Grizzlies did not. There were times where the Grizzlies were dropping their bigs all the way to the rim and expecting the other four players to be applying maximum pressure. Is that I think that they might need to look at, credit to Jarace here, really quick hands. I think that this might just need to be on a full-on peel switching scheme where Jarace switches onto the screener, Obi rotates to the corner, Jay Huff peels to Wemby at the wing, so that it's not so much ground for Jay Huff to be having to cover if they want to provide that much pressure at the point of attack. To me, that's an easier way to do it because, again, great reaction speed from Jarace. That's what saved that play. Otherwise, that would have been an easy corner cut because there's no way Jay Huff's getting back. And then the fouling thing, like numbers, 5.859 fouls per 100 possessions. That's the second most of literally any player. 202 players who logged at least 50 minutes during preseason. Jay Huff had the second highest foul rate. Rebounding stuff. This was after an entire halftime, so I can't blame this on conditioning. He had been on the bench. First play he comes in, he had already given up the standstill dunk from Wemby on a putback on a missed free throw, and then the exact same thing here with Luke Cornett, and then he had to come right back out of the game. And then just the last one I would say is the double big stuff did not go super well for the Pacers. Here's another tremendous Dylan Harper drive where the issue is that he split that clearly. But if you're going to play double big, the absolute last thing that I think that you would want to do is borrow from the Boston Celtics and be like, let's have the sink defender rotate from the corner when they're a center rather than just having the guy in the dunker spot rotate to the rim. That's too much ground for Jay to have to cover to be able to get to that layup. So That's the lack of reaction speed at the dunker, which is what led to that. And also, Jay's probably just used to tracking the ball in general. But the double big stuff, I don't know. Maybe against certain lineups, the NBA is playing more double bigs. Maybe at times the Pacers might want to look at that. But I didn't find Jay Huff to be a compelling enough driver, especially in the types of double big lineups that the Pacers are going to have to play, because this isn't the same as when it was Miles and Sabonis, where Miles has more balance as a driver, but also a lot of times you'd be playing Sabonis above the break and handoff situations. He's not just standing in the lane. And in Miles' case, a lot of times he's a compelling driver because he's literally driving past the 5-man at the top of the key. There's no rim protector behind him. That's different than Jay Huff is literally just driving into Tony Bradley's guy or literally just driving into James Wiseman's guy. So I don't know. I didn't find those minutes super compelling, but those are the types of things that I would look at. And that's why I would say, kind of like with Isaiah, there is hope that some of this stuff is going to get better because preseason is preseason. Guys aren't putting out their absolute best efforts all the time, every minute of the game in preseason, but also I think the conditioning level will get better from Huff, just like I think some of the chemistry stuff will get better from Isaiah with time. So that's kind of like a ray of hope I can provide maybe on that front. But we shall move into some broader league-wide questions to wrap up. Those were the most Pacer-centric ones. Reed Sawyer, what are some Eastern Conference teams that you think have been overlooked or underestimated coming into this season?
You skipped a question there, by the way.
Where did I skip?
The one from Ryan? Or did you not want to?
No, we do want to answer that one. I'm sorry. There will be one more Pacer-specific question. But let's just do that one. I missed it. My page order was out of order. I do want to answer that one. On February 6, 2026, will Bennedict Mathurin be a Pacer? At the end of the season, which center has the most minutes played? This is a fun one.
So I'm going to guess that Bennedict Mathurin will not be a Pacer.
Really?
Yeah.
I think he will be.
Okay. So
I think he will be.
Do you think this is dependent, and here's the fun part, do you think this is dependent more so on how Bennedict plays or on the performance of the team?
I think that Ben has looked very sharp offensively in preseason, and I also think that defensively I've liked. He had a quote where he said, definitely I'm looking forward to taking on these assignments more than anything. I think that his ball pressure has been good in spots. My thing is, I keep remembering from the podcast that I did with Rick that Rick said it's important to Ben to be a starter. If that applies to more beyond this year, I think it would be hard to come up with, just as it was last year, why you would start him over Aaron or Andrew in the long term. But if he makes some improvements there, maybe. But I think the only way he's going to get traded mid-season is if there's an option at center that's just too good for the Pacers to pass up. Otherwise, I suspect they're going to give the year, see what improvements he makes, see how he adapts to the scheme, and then make that decision in restricted free agency. If they want to match it or if they want to go look for sign and trades, I kind of think that that's something that will happen at the end of the season, unless, like I said, there's just something that's too good to be true that they can't pass up. I'd be a little bit surprised if it was a mid-season deal.
Memphis, don't you find that you're missing a talented two-guard next to Ja? And don't you think that silly Jaren Jackson, it's just too much driving from the big man position? Wouldn't you love to have Bennedict Mathurin and a boatload of picks to put Jaren in Indiana?
I kind of wondered that over the summer. Then they signed him to a massive extension because when they moved Desmond Bane, I was like, oh, maybe they're blowing it up. Bring Jaren home. But then he signed a massive extension, unfortunately for us all.
I think the
Mavericks have a lot of centers too. I'm not sure if they need all those guys, quite frankly, but
that's true. At first blush, I think you would think of Jaren and Pascal as a funky fit, but I do think it works. But also Jaren and Tyrese as a gruesome twosome going into the future, I think would be, oh, dude, that would be so cool. Anyway, I'm just wish casting. Yeah, we've represented either side of it, but basically my thought process is Ben clearly has higher aspirations for his game, and if there are big time Bennedict Mathurin fans that are upset at this, my apologies, but I don't think he's made a compelling case for why you would put him above Nesmith and definitely not above Nembhard. And I don't even know if that would benefit, even if he was better on the whole, I don't know if it would benefit the Pacers greatly. They probably still expect to play a certain style once Tyrese is back. And Bennedict, it's his world, man. You know, he deserves to have an opportunity to
Yep.
get paid. We see this happen all the time. It doesn't have to be hurt feelings or anything, but it could. There's potential that there's a misalignment here. That's my perspective. The
Mhm.
the center who gets the most minutes, I mean, Isaiah Jackson. It's that. Isaiah Jackson.
I lean towards Isaiah because I think the Obi there's not as many compelling reasons for anyone to eat at Isaiah's minutes unless it's foul trouble, which I talked about Jay Huff's foul trouble, but Isaiah also had issues. Only Isaiah was like picking up frustration fouls that were non-shooting fouls. But Obi, there's compelling reasons to play Obi at stretch 5 over Jay Huff in places where Obi might eat at Jay Huff's minutes in ways that I'm not fully expecting Tony Bradley and James Wiseman to necessarily. So that
Can I
leads
tell
me
you
to think
something?
that it will be Isaiah.
If James Wiseman leads them in minutes, I'm hooting and hollering. I'm like, what kind of season are we having? Let's rip and roar, man. I've been waiting.
It's
Yeah, for
somewhat
people.
it's
Go ahead.
somewhat telling to me that Tony Bradley has not been waived yet. I'll just leave
Yeah.
that there.
Well, also I think the substitution
Because
patterns for James were not that of a guy who, the
I think
team
it was very
feels.
deliberate in the second game against San Antonio that they put James in the game in the first half and had him go in opposite of Luke Cornett, because Luke Cornett's physicality did bother Jay Huff in the prior game, but I think that they wanted to see what James looked like in regular backup minutes. Um, I think, and the fact that they waived Cam yesterday and they haven't waived Tony Bradley quite yet, they already know what Tony Bradley can do in that type of situation because they saw it in the Eastern Conference Finals and the finals in terms of like, hey, we just need a guy to rebound and you know provide some sort of a floor here. But James has a higher ceiling than Tony Bradley. I think that Tony Bradley has a little bit more of a reliable floor at times, so that's kind of the balancing act there.
I'll say also for podcast listeners, the lore between James Wiseman and I is that James was playing on the Pistons and he was going to be, I guess, probably an RFA or UFA, regardless. I tweeted out, I was like, I would like the Raptors to put out a flyer on James Wiseman. And then obviously ended up with Pacers. And I said, oh, I'll cover him anyway. And then I started writing this thing for basketball she wrote about James Wiseman. They tore his Achilles. And then I said, okay, well, I don't get to do it anymore. Then somehow he ended up on the Raptors, and I said, "Oh my God, James Wiseman is a Raptor." And then he got waived immediately, and now he's back on the Pacers, and we'll see where it is in the coming days or the coming weeks. But anyway, I've been longing to cover James Wiseman's game.
Now to the league-wide questions. They did get out of order. I didn't mean to skip that one. Reed Sawyer, what are some Eastern Conference teams that you think have been overlooked or underestimated coming into this season?
So I thought it was the Raptors, but I think that's already been accounted for. Not to do the Vegas markets thing, but they went from being like a 32 expected win team to now, it's probably they'd have to win 40 for you to make money or something. Like everyone kind of shifted. A lot of analysts also went from not even considering the Raptors to like, okay, looking at the numbers, some stuff. Brandon Ingram maybe sobering on the idea that like, oh yeah, Brandon Ingram is definitely not a star, but he does things the Raptors need. In fact, the Raptors, their preseason stats, basically they were only good at stuff that Ingram does on offense, which is pretty funny. He'll elevate them some, but I don't think they're compelling as an answer anymore. I feel like the pendulum swung back their way. They might
I
even
sensed that it started
disappoint.
swinging after we did the pod. Did you notice this?
Hey, I don't know.
This was
Taste
going to be
me.
my answer. People can just go watch the podcast that Samson and I already did like a few weeks ago. Um, I guess the only other team that I'd probably bring up here is it felt to me that people were very down on the Pistons after they lost to the Knicks in the first round for reasons that I didn't fully understand, because I'm not using injuries as an excuse. Like, you play the team in front of you, but the one guy that had an opportunity to guard Karl-Anthony Towns wasn't involved at any point in that series. So I think that kind of mattered. Obviously, it's unfortunate that Jaden Ivey is now hurt again, but he did not play in that series either. I still think I like the Pistons overall. And it just kind of felt to me like people were suddenly low on them for reasons that I
Well,
didn't fully get.
Cade, I think gives you such a strong offensive floor.
Yeah.
Like if I'm building a contender, do I want Cade to have this maximum amount of usage? Probably not, but he's going to give them a lot, and they play within themselves defensively. I don't think they've improved, but they're in the thick of it, I think.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
I
it
haven't,
seemed
yeah.
like people were like, I don't know, they might slide down here. I'm like, in this Eastern Conference, I'm not so sure. But that's kind of my thought there. I honestly don't have my finger on the pulse of what everybody thinks about every other team. My answer might have been the Pacers here, if not for the fact that now they're entering a season where, like, to me, if there was people on this roster who really, really, really did not need to get hurt, it would be Nembhard, Siakam, and TJ McConnell. Like, those are the three people that, like, and that's not because those are the three best players, but they're the ones that can't be replicated by other people on the roster. And the Pacers were already a team last year that preferred to play more than one point guard at once. And
Yeah.
now they literally have one point guard. So I think
Well,
at the beginning of the series, I hope I'm wrong, but I think at the beginning of the season here, they need to get healthy.
yeah.
So in terms of what people were thinking, they might meet the expectations of people who are lower than them at the beginning of the year just by virtue of the fact that I think trying to scheme around some of these things in the ways that we've shown in the clip is going to be difficult,
I
especially given the
think,
difficulty of their schedule.
yeah. The Celtics and the Pacers both have their star toward their Achilles, and they both have a lot of like pedigree, winning
Yeah.
pedigree around the team, or they've earned that perception. Usually you only have one team like that in a conference, and usually there's like another star who can truly carry. Neither Siakam or Brown are viewed that way. So both these teams kind of gum up a lot of predictions. They make it very fluid in that place. And I did the NLCS. I did some Celtics stuff with Bobby and Noah, and I said I thought that the Celtics would be at the back end of the play-in, and Celtics fans were really upset at that. And I was like, damn, I thought that was like not that crazy,
Yeah.
but yeah, the
The East
Celtics.
the East is
Uh,
also just very strange. You could give me a pretty wide range for a lot of these teams and either outcome could occur and I'd be like, sure.
yep.
Brendan Chan, what are some unique tactics used by the Pacers last year that you think the rest of the league will try to emulate this year, besides the obvious push the pace and full court pressure, or vice versa? What new tactics might the Pacers adapt this year with a reduced roster?
Okay, so this one's easy. I know you said besides the push the pace and full court pressure,
Mm-hmm.
it's going. That's part of the answer. It's teams are going to lean farther into that. Particular, like the full court pressure was already a thing that's happening, but hit aheads. I reckon a bunch of teams just start seeing that volume go way up, and then new tactics the Pacers adopt. Hello, Raptors. Let's tag up. Let's see about that. Caitlin addressed it with Ben being a great crasher and a guy who provides that pressure immediately. I don't know how it'll manifest with the rest of the roster or how widely the Pacers will use it, but tagging up, I presume, will be part and parcel of some of what the Pacers do.
I think since I'm not going to go with the obvious ones of push the pace and full court pressure because we were asked not to,
I
I will
do as I
say
please.
I was gonna say that I think that we'll continue to see more teams playing conceptual offense and playing out of triggers where it's not a set play, but rather, hey, the ball came to rest at the wing, and when it comes to the rest at the wing with a big, we automatically go into toss and chase. Or hey, action specific. If a guard gets a switch, we automatically go to a ghost screen. Or when the ball comes to rest here, we automatically call up the big to go into split action. Those aren't sequenced actions that a coach drew up in a play. It's this is how we want to play to gain advantages based on the location of the ball or which players are involved. I think the Cavs really adapted that under Kenny Atkinson, and now the new head coach of the Portland Fire was very key into that. One of the smartest basketball minds that I've had the opportunity to talk to. I think that more teams are going to be doing that and also really incorporating it into their practice structures. So that's where I would go there. And then on the other side of things, yes, the tagging up, if people don't know what that is, I can throw up quick clips here. That's definitely the one that the Pacers are going to look to that they haven't been doing in the past. They ranked 26th in their percentage of possessions with at least 3 offensive players crashing last year, roughly at like 4.5. This year in preseason, they're averaging 20.7. That ranked 6th. So a shot goes up from above the break, you're going to see the Pacers scrumming middle. More so here on the shot from Andrew, where you're going to see the other guys go run at the backs of their matchups. You really have to be disciplined with this, though, because if you're sending the other 4 and like Talon Peters shooting here, a big tagging up killer is if you don't go with the closeout guy, because then that's going to be a leak out. Talon's too late. Then you're going to see another one, another tagging up killer. When the ball goes up, you cannot run under the underside of the matchup. Like Talon needs to stay at the back there. Otherwise, you're creating a fast break opportunity. So you can see that in some of the games where the Pacers, you really have to be disciplined with what routes you're running when you're trying to do this. And that's something that, again, they're trying to, they're problem solving. They're experimenting with something that's new. Their transition defense had some issues. 27th in opponent fast break points, 7th highest transition frequency. And that was kind of like a recurrent theme with some of the teams that tried to do this last year. They had higher offensive rebounding rates, but some of them saw reductions in their transition defense, which this is supposed to be a transition defense scheme.
Yep.
By staying at the high side of the matchups, you're creating a situation where your transition defense should be 5-on-5, but it requires a hive mind and absolute adherence and discipline from the 5 players on the floor so that you're not, like, as I said, if you run under those matchups, if you don't stay with the closeout guy, it's going to be a killer. So Pacers did get more offensive rebounds, which is critical, because when we talk about Tyrese being the immaculate exception, people are asking, what if Nembhard turns the ball over more? Pacers are going to turn the ball over more. You got to get those possessions back somewhere. This is their path to doing it. So they were 9th in offensive rebounding rate. That's much higher than last year. Just got to find the balance with it. So that's like one of the biggest numbers I'm going to be watching this year is what happens to their transition defense, because last year they were not a team that crashed. Their frequency was very, very low. So something that they're going to have to continue tinkering with, I'm sure.
There's always this thing that happens with like basketball philosophy and like, okay, move here, do this, do that. And it's just the fact that, these people are, everyone is deeply human.
Yeah.
If you're on a guy's back and the ball is in play and you're like, I think I can go get it, even if you're tagging up, I think you're going to try and get to the front of that guy a lot to go pursue the ball. And it's just
to the
tough.
chagrin of coaching staffs everywhere.
Yes,
they're going to be like,
exactly.
do not do that.
Yeah.
There was even a possession last year because Memphis was like the top tagging up team. This is like kind of originated in the NBL and then trickled over to Europe before it really trickled into the NBA. Is Jay Huff did this a lot. And like there was even a time when they played the Pacers last year where he was tagging up to TJ and he stayed on the high side of TJ. Like, and that would be very hard for a big to do because it would be like, oh, I'm just going to slip on the underside here, but you can't do that because then TJ could get a run out. This question really surprised me that's coming up next. Life enthusiast. Samson spent some time exploring new landscapes in Nova Scotia this offseason. This surprised me because, like, I guess my readers know more about your travel schedule than I do. Like, I didn't even know this was a thing that was happening. After watching the most extended run of Pacer basketball ever, along with the current preseason, how do you foresee the landscape of the NBA changing? Do the crashing waves of the relentless ebb and flow of the game finally erode and expose a hidden shoreline to explore? What brilliantly colorful change do you expect the rotation of seasons to bring? What an artful question.
Nova Scotia. The colors were beautiful. So many different trees, the greens, reds, yellows, oranges, a lot of red, which I think is what makes it pretty unique. But there's 2 competing conceptions I have about where the league is going. And I had them prior to the finals. I'm not just cribbing stuff here, but the defense, court coverage, and I think the prevalence of referees, if a defense is good, kind of letting guys manhandle a little bit more of that hand-to-hand combat that we saw the Thunder were so good at. Obviously, they have tremendous defenders to do it. And I think defense will win in the next few years. I think defense is going to get a stronger foothold. But then you look at the Pacers, and the Pacers were like, we don't care what you do. 1.4 points per possession. Like, loser, you can't keep up with me. And it was incredible how they did it. But there's one role that I think will come back into the NBA and will be hyper important. And I don't think it'll be represented on the Pacers, really. But as teams, as defenses get that foothold, I think the volume scorer who is highly adaptive, who is very resilient, and has 56 or 57% true shooting and is a plus playmaker, but not necessarily a star. I think that role, kind of think of like the six-man role that is not nearly as prevalent or as important as used to be. I think that will come back in some form or fashion. And that's one of the biggest changes. I think that role will become available because they'll be just like, we're playing spreadsheet basketball a little bit, and teams have gotten so good at taking away options. And we've kind of, made quick decisions and multiply them as often as possible. We need, the third or fourth guy on the roster to be a guy who can kind of boogie woogie and make stuff happen. That is a role I think will become, because that's a role that's kind of gone away a little bit, and
This
for
is
good
like,
reason.
I feel like this is something that we already talked about on like 2 mailbags. Because like somebody actually asked that question. They're like, "Do you think the sixth man will come back?" And like, because the archetype of like Derek White, Drew Holiday, Andrew Nembhard has become very prevalent. Like, what archetype do you think will come back? And the person was like, "Do you think
And
it'll be like the Jamal Crawfords, the Karis LeVerts, the type player?" Like, I feel
and
like this.
Tamani Kamara is like, about to enter the Nemhard
Oh
White.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
love
yeah,
Tamani.
so
Um,
good.
I guess like real quick rundown of mine is I think we'll continue to see more spacing, inverted spacing, both with shooting and non-shooting bigs, and experimenting with putting bigs at the slot, putting bigs in the corners, running more skip concepts and rifles because of what that opens up in the paint. I think that there's going to be even more mixed man and zone defenses, more, amoeba-like coverages where you're covering space more so than you're covering bodies. The tagging up is already a thing that's here. I think that we might see even more unique, innovative pick and roll coverages, whether that's switch to peel, whether that's weak to next, whether that's the hedge to under that Dyson Daniels and Trey were executing. And then probably more than anything is just the pick and roll continuing to be more of a 10-man action rather than a 2-man action. Oftentimes, like nostalgia, we like watching the 2-man game a lot of the time, but there's a lot happening on an NBA court. And I think that's going to continue, especially given that pick and roll has become less prevalent. How's a way to make it more prevalent is to make it even harder to guard. So, yeah.
Could you imagine? Now, this could just be me being like, oh, young guy who watches this era doesn't respect the old era. But I would love to put like five guys who run a strong pick and roll in from this era against like the 2004 Pistons, a team I love.
Yeah.
I would just love to see and give the Pistons a chance to like, you get like 2 weeks to do tape and then see what happens with these schemes. You know what I mean? I would love to see something like that.
Pistons meet the wheel action.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think those are just like quick
Well, we
things that
call
I
it
thought of.
Raptor over here.
They do call it Raptor. I like some of the terminology that when you watch Raptor games you pick up on, because they call the low man the seeker and they call the nail defender eagle.
They call
Which
me the Seeker. Keep on
like
seeing.
I find it very like the nail defender is an eagle stance. I think that's interesting. They're always using like a visual terminology a lot of the time. Okay, so this one, hopefully this can be fun. I actually gave quite a bit of thought to this. Amy829 says, this may be too far into the future, but since Samson will join as well, and I heard Zach Lowe and Steve Nash talk about it too, if LeBron, Curry, and KD were not part of Team USA for the 2028 Olympics, who do you think will make the Team USA roster versus who do you think will be on Team Canada? And what does Team Canada need to do to properly prepare to beat the US in 2028?
So we can pal around about who's going to be on the USA roster, but the very quick thing that Canada needs to do is they need Zach Edey to be unbelievable in FIBA basketball, and it is attuned to his strengths. I mean, he's very well set up to be unbelievable in FIBA. The guard questions are not a problem for,
Mm-hmm.
like Andrew Nembhard and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It's a pretty great duo to work with. And they have a glut of guys like RJ Barrett, Shaden Sharp, Lou Dort. Keyshawn George will factor into this. Bennedict Mathurin can be part of this. Like, they have a glut of guys who can play at that level. And it just depends probably how they work off of the aforementioned two of Shai and Andrew. They need a power forward or a backup center. They need someone to fill out that. They need someone to emerge. Leonard Miller, please. I need a hero. I'm calling out
Brandon
for you,
Clark.
brother. Brandon, I don't know, man. I Once upon a time,
I think
the
Leonard Miller and Brandon Clark can probably meet the moment as well as Dwight Powell and Trey Lyles did against France. Can they not?
This is rude. You're being rude right now. This is a sullen moment for me.
Lessort had them all out of the sorts over and over again.
Just like a drop step. That's a drop step from a Frenchman ended our hopes. Anyway, I've gone along with this. They probably want to hear about America, but Canada has to beat America. America's very good at basketball. It's very hard to beat them. We beat them at the World Cup when not everyone was there. But
let's brainstorm Team USA's starting lineup here. Let's put our heads together. 2028.
Bam.
Okay, yes, Anthony Edwards is obviously the starting 2 guard, and I think it's very, very likely that Bam, as a former gold medalist on a team guarded or coached by Eric Spoelstra, is going to be the starting center.
Yep.
So the other 3 spots, point guard.
Can I do power forward? The power forward is a competition between Jalen Johnson and Scotty Barnes, and whoever has the best years coming up.
I do not think so. I think that's probably a competition between Banchero, Tatum, and then.
Oh yeah, Tatum. The 4. Yes, right. Yeah. I was thinking of him as a 3, but in FIBA, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably look at Tatum or Banchero, and then I think that they're going to take multiple bigs because of Wemby, and Jokic. So I suspect that 2 of the other spots, in addition to Bam, are going to be Mobley and Holmgren. So they might, because of the skill sets of those guys, experiment with even playing double big at times. I mean, they played Bam and Anthony Davis together in the Olympics here recently. So I think if I was putting a starting lineup together tentatively and really crossing my fingers that Tyrese is going to look like Tyrese, I think it's going to be Tyrese, Anthony Edwards, Jalen Williams, Jason Tatum, Bam. Yeah.
By the way, an apology for not mentioning Mobley, who, yes, Trey has been telling me he's Jamaican and he'll play for Team Jamaica for so long. It actually stuck in my brain that he wasn't available. So that checks out to me. J-Dub, yeah.
And then back up, like Devin Booker was tremendous for Team USA in the Olympics. Like probably the unsung hero, to be honest. Because like obviously KD and LeBron and Steph were amazing, but Devin Booker's ability to scale down and be connective tissue, and he actually played pretty good defense for them. Like I think he's probably a shoe-in. And then like wild cards, I like the idea of putting, because Team USA always wants a pressure guard. Like a guy like Drew Holiday will make this roster, or a guy like Derek White will make this roster. So I kind of look at Amen Thompson, because you're also gaining his athleticism. So I look at Amen, and then I think Trey Murphy might even be there too, just because like they always want a shooter. They always want a shooter in case they get zoned, and you're not only just getting a shooter with Trey Murphy, you're also getting his defense. So, and then backup point, I'd probably go Jalen Brunson, maybe Cade.
Cade, 2028. I feel like he'll probably be on there. Jalen, he might have like a lot of wear and tear at that point. I'm not sure, but I'd probably go Cade instead. Also, Amen Thompson, just so you know. Trey has also told me that he'll be playing for Team Jamaica instead. You should see Team Jamaica in Trey's imagination. It's wonderful.
Isn't Scotty Barnes contemplating this?
Yes. I've been making the joke, though, that Scotty is saying, like, if he doesn't get to go with Team USA, yes, I'm on Team Jamaica. I was saying that's the joke. But I don't know anything about what Scotty thinks. That's the joke.
I also think another guard here Tyrese Maxey might be there too. Another person to throw out there. So basically, like if it is Tyrese, Anthony Edwards, Jalen Williams, Jason Tatum, Bam, then if I'm Team Canada, and I'm sure that like you're probably going to roll your eyes at me now, I'd probably go Shea, Nembhard, Keyshawn George, Lou Dort, Zach Edey. That's probably who I'd go with. RJ's been tremendous for Team Canada when I've watched, but I think that with the lineup the U.S. has, and the reason I would pick those names is Nembhard has more industry knowledge on anybody than Tyrese. Nembhard, you're going to be able to use to full court pressure pretty easily there. Lou Dort, I can put on Anthony Edwards, I think, and try to do a lot of face guarding. And then I just like the idea of having Keyshawn George as a shooter, because like Shea's going to do his Shea stuff. I'm not worried about that. But like having more length on the floor, And then I might even just like put Shea on Tatum and be like, if Tatum gets a lot of post ups, maybe we actually kind of like that. But the biggest component of why I picked those names is with Edey, I think you want to like watch them. If I'm Team Canada, I'm like watching the Memphis Grizzlies and their defensive scheme and being like, we want to implement that. That's what we want. Like we want Zach Edey. We are going to play the spy defense or the center field defense. We're going to drop him all the way to the rim, take advantage of the defensive 3 seconds rules, and we are going to expect Shea and Nembhard and Kashawn George and Lou Dort to pressure the heck out of passing lanes, denials, similar to what the Warriors did against the Kings in the playoffs several years ago with Sabonis. Make Bam have to set up those screening angles and the handoffs, and live with playing off of him in the paint. That's what schematically I would try to do as much as I could. And then I would benefit from having, potentially Mathurin, Shaedon Sharpe, RJ Barrett as guys that can attack second side out of Shea's gravity and hybrid type lineups is what I would do.
My worry with your lineup, although I do see it, also Keyshawn George is his defense, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He has a crazy reputation as a defender for a guy who played on a Wizards team, and like his true shooting percentage was probably like 47%. But he's a good defender. I
Yep.
remember I watched his first preseason game when they were in Montreal last year, and I was like, whoa, this looks really great. I'm not convinced on the shooting, although it's very good for Team Canada if he does shoot it, because he would be very, very good there. Lou Dort, I wonder about by Dort by 2028. I would love if Shaedon Sharpe like stole a spot. I would love that. He's so electric, and a lot of times you need like an inventiveness to score in FIBA.
Yeah.
And it's an inventiveness a lot of FIBA players have for the game that the flow NBA players who are great in space have a tough time implementing themselves. So also as a final note from me, Andrew this year for him with the Pacers will probably pay huge dividends for Team Canada in 2028, I presume.
That's true. Yeah, because I mean, in FIBA, like and like Jokic and Luka have talked about this, that in the NBA you see the help defender coming, and FIBA the help defender's already there. So
Yeah.
like your ability to make passing reads as a driver is pretty important.
And limited defenders are far more protected in FIBA. So you have like these limited defenders who have a bit of length, who are maybe more imaginative passers and screeners, and they can like hit like a 19-foot jump shot. And that guy is creating seams for people all over the floor, facilitating like same side actions and all that kind of stuff. I really like that the games are different. Coach Darko was asked about this, merging, and he said that he really hoped that FIBA maintains its identity even with the creeping of NBA, global stuff.
Last question, which is a question for you, James. Part 1: what convinced
Oh
Samson to
yeah.
stay on for another season of Pacers coverage, and what could be a potential gap here?
You didn't ask
I asked part 1.
What convinced Samson to stay on for another season of Pacers coverage, and what could be a potential gap here?
Yeah.
Just that money. The Benjamins, baby. Yeah. I'm the most well-paid freelancer in the world, if you guys didn't know. Because the large reason why Caitlin and I even started working together was because we both do the same type of work, although I will maintain mine is not as good as hers, and it's a bunch of different things. I learn from Caitlin when I work with her. So not only is it work and like I'm doing my job, but it's learning opportunities I find. I genuinely believe, and do not say in a glib manner, that Caitlin is the best in the world. And I like this is like when guys would want to go play with LeBron. I like working with the best in the world. And Caitlin and I are friends, and it's awesome to work with your friend. I've done podcasts with people who are not like friends, and it's just kind of like you know. And also, I think Caitlin and I have similar optimisms, hopes, and sensibilities for the industry we work in. So everything fits well. That's why.
I mean, I can't answer this because I'm not the person who was convinced to stay. So I don't really have anything to add to what Samson's rationale was for why he agreed graciously to continue doing Pacer coverage with me in a way that hopefully people enjoy listening to. Well, that wraps up the mailbags. I was hoping to get Samson out of here on time because he has a meeting that he told me that he needs to go to in pretty short order here. So I'll let him say if he has any closing thoughts. Pacers open the season against the same team that he watched them close the season against, the Oklahoma City Thunder, at home this Thursday. Closing thoughts on the Pacers, this podcast, anything else you want to say before we close this out?
Well, it's I feel the same way about the Pacers and the Raptors in that I had more questions than answers after preseason.
Yeah.
Nothing, but honestly, when you're looking for a team that you're unsure of, you you know, there's like subjective validation for teams that are good and unchanged. You just assume like, well, they're good last year, so preseason doesn't matter. And if it's a team that has to show change, then anything that doesn't go well, you assume it won't be. These guys could all just be great, but I've submitted myself to the journey of these teams trying to figure things out and enjoying the process of watching that happen and discussing it with fans and with Caitlin. And I think that's a great way to enjoy this Pacers season. They have to try and achieve some things that they should be good at, and they have to try and achieve some things that they have no right being good at. And I wonder where they strike the balance on all of it.
Oh no, really fast. I forgot something. We have to do this really quick. Breaking popsicle news. Breaking popsicle news. It is the popsicle of the month. So I just want to tell everybody knows my favorite store-bought popsicle brand, Outshine. They have come out with 3 new flavors. Outshine fruit blends, pina colada. They also have a passion fruit one and a cherry limeade one. I could not find the passion fruit or the cherry limeade set yet. So I had to go with the pina colada, and this is me eating it. And this isn't product placement at all that I happen to be wearing this sweatshirt. If you like it, you can certainly find the link at basketballshewrote.com as a review for the popsicle. It's basically just a mashup of the coconut one and the pineapple one they already have. If you were hoping for it to taste like straight up pina colada, I don't think that's what you will find. But if I like the pineapple and the coconut are 2 of my favorite ones. So that's good. In future months, I have high hopes of finding the 2 flavors that are actually new that they do not make, being they do not have anything passion fruit. I wanted to find that one, but I couldn't. So that is the way that I will close it out. I will also say thank you to everyone because I cannot do this without people supporting me on Patreon. And that's where all of these questions came from. And I always, hopefully people know by how long it took us to get through these. I get asked very detailed, very insightful questions, which I appreciate. Thank you for interacting with me on Patreon. Thank you for reading the stuff during preseason. Whether you think this is a gap year or not, the coverage for me is not going to be in a gap year. The coverage from Samson and I is not going to be a gap year. I'm hopeful that I can continue to recruit him at least to keep doing this job, even if he doesn't submit to my recreational recommendations. So you can say the goodbye phrase because I think people would miss it if we didn't.
All right. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it very much. As Caitlin said, you can subscribe to the Patreon, but also the YouTube and the podcast is supposed to help us reach more people. A lot of people love this aspect of it, so you can help us reach more people by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Share it with people if they want to get a little bit more in-depth with basketball, not just even the Pacers. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Caitlin is the best in the world, and whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and good.